Hey, Danny. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being part of this conversation with me. Maybe to just start off, maybe, we've had some conversations before, including some recorded conversations, but for people who are not familiar with you and your story at a high level, would you mind just sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Danny Peterson. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm originally from New Jersey and Virginia on the East Coast. And so I am a former Catholic priest. I was ordained to the Catholic priesthood in 2016 in Newark, New Jersey. And I did most of my Catholic priestly ministry in Essex County, New Jersey, and the Archdiocese in Newark. And so I joined seminary in 2008, and I was in seminary for about 6.5 years. I took one semester off, and so that's why I say 6.5. And then I was in active ministry for about 3.5 years when I asked for a leave of absence. I was on a leave of absence for about a year and a half, and then I went back to priestly ministry for a few months, and then after a few months, again, I'm just kind of giving high level timeline here. After a few months, asked to be, ended up leaving ministry full time, and then I moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. So that's kind of some of the
Yeah.
timeline points.
Yeah. And can you just talk a little bit about how like ex-gay narratives or conversion therapy kind of fit into that story?
Yeah, it's a critical part of the story. So I was raised in a very like faithful, devout family, and the Catholic Church and sacramental ministry was a really big part of my growing up. And so I had great experiences as a young kid. I loved my parish. We had, there was youth group and all sorts of fun things. So I had a great upbringing. My family, my parents were very grounded in a very moderate faith, and also a healthy faith, that God loves me and God loves everyone, and
Hmm.
God's plan is joy, happiness, peace, sincerity, truth, integrity, all those things. It was really as a
Hmm.
young adult that got where things got kind of confusing. I started feeling a call to the
Hmm.
priesthood late in college, and I remember as a gay person at the time, I was very confused by it. I was very closeted. I had never talked
Hmm.
to anyone about it. And I remember at the time thinking, well, I don't know if I can become a priest if I'm gay, right? And
Hmm.
I ended up
Hmm.
talking to some people, and that's kind of a long story, but I can get into it if you want. I ended up talking to some people who said, well, think about it this way. I didn't tell them I was gay. I asked them, what about gay people? And they said, if Jesus can heal the blind and raise the dead to new life,
Hmm.
why can't he turn you
Hmm.
straight? And I was working on chastity at the time, and I was introduced to a chastity support group, which was basically a full conversion therapy kind of sexual orientation change effort group, where it was, you are gay because you have these wounds, like your father never loved you
Hmm.
properly, you identify as a female, and you kind of lost track, you got wayward, and these wounds have resulted in you being gay. And in order to heal those wounds, here's this prescription that we're going to give you. And then that
Hmm.
kind of led me, long story short, into a conversion therapy kind of experience where they tried to like fix or heal the wounds, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is how would you describe the prescription that they gave you?
Okay, the prescription was very specific. They had like a specific kind of rubric. Here is the rubric: you were wounded, your dad never loved you, you identified more with the girls. The funny thing is, none of those things applied to me. Like I get along great with my dad.
Hmm.
Like we still talk today. They were they they had this idea that I was like, gender identity was confusion. So some of the people in the camps, they would say like, you've always wanted to be a girl, you always identified more with girls, and I was like, no, not really. No, I felt very comfortable in my masculine identity.
My experience of you, like when I met you, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty manly man. Yeah.
And just not, and they were like, you were bullied when you were a kid. You were never good at sports. I was like, no, I was on the basketball team, the baseball team. I mean, I played all-star baseball. I skied. I was on the football team, and I was never
Yeah.
really bullied. I mean, like everyone has a few ounces of bullying, right?
Yeah.
And then they were like, this is you kind of like making up for what you missed. One of their
Hmm.
prescriptions was, you want what you don't have. And so, like, if you look at a
Hmm.
beautiful man with a
Yeah.
six pack, and I'm a little like chubby, for example, I want that six pack of abs so bad that I'm gonna like lust
Uh,
for it. And it's that was Elizabeth Moberly. You eroticize your deepest emotional needs.
yeah.
And I mean, I at the time I kind of
Yeah.
believed that. I was like, yeah, like I could. At the time, Michael Phelps was big in the Olympics, and I'm like, maybe I just want the six pack abs so bad that I like am now like lusting for
Yeah.
him. But ironically, it's like, well, who doesn't
Yeah.
want six pack abs, right? Like he's just a beautiful man. Like there's nothing pathological about it. It's just they had that
Yeah.
prescription, and I remember going to the camp, one of the conversion therapy camps. People can change, journey into manhood, and at
Yeah, the
one
journey into
point,
manhood. Yeah.
yeah, they asked me to do this like psychoeducational kind of like role play. And at one point, I said,
Mm.
to be honest with you, guys, I was like, this doesn't apply to me right now. And they were upset with me. They said, you're being resistant. And I said, I truly,
Oh, yeah,
I'm here.
classic.
Yeah, I'm here because I want to change. I'm not being resistant. I
Yeah.
literally like this rubric
Yeah.
just doesn't apply to me at this time. And they're like, well,
Yeah.
if you're gonna change, you need to be more open. I'm like, I am open. It's just not working. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
interesting.
I had a professional colleague who once said that there's some conflict between me and another leader, and we're talking about that leader, and they said, like that person, the thing about them is that they got some feedback and they made changes. And they said the sign of a smart person is that when they get new information, they change their mind. And I think one of the problems with a lot of these narratives and the people who support them is they're incapable of taking in new information and don't know what to do with it.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
Because if it
yeah,
doesn't fit the rubric, then all of a sudden
yeah,
their whole kind of like
yeah,
algorithm goes to
yeah.
pieces. So, um,
Yeah, the other part of it too that I think is also just really interesting is, a lot of critics of conversion therapy and these narratives have said that for a lot of people, they actually had fine relationships with their parents until they went into conversion therapy, where the parents got blamed for the homosexuality, and then that's when the relationships with their parents started to break down. That's one of the arguments that parents of conversion therapy survivors made in their brief in the recent the current Supreme Court case over conversion therapy.
yeah.
So, actually a lot of these narratives create the problems that they say they're trying to solve.
Yeah, so I worked with Dr. Phil Mango in New York City. That was a very,
Oh yeah.
very, very poor experience, and a very
Yeah.
damaging experience, I think. And he meant well, right? I
Yeah.
have no resentment against him as a person. But one of the things he said, he goes, we're gonna have to do some work with you and your father. And I said, well, I'm open. I'm here. I'm paying. I'm open to it. And so
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, it's going to be a lot. And I said, okay. And I remember talking to my mom about it. And I said, hey, I'm going to have to do some pretty serious repair work with my dad. And she was like, okay, yeah, I mean, whatever you need to do. She's like, well, like, what do you need to work on? I'm like, well, just all the things. And then when she pushed, I was like, I didn't really have anything to work on. I mean, you can always find little things, right? Like,
Yeah.
whatever. And so I remember going back to him
Yeah.
the next week and I said, hey, I just want to take some notes on maybe like what I need to work on with my father. And he's like, well, it's
Yeah.
whatever you want. And I was like, there's nothing I think I really need. I mean, we can, again, every relationship in life, you can always
Yeah.
dial it in, right? Like maybe we can communicate
Yeah.
better. But so it was this whole thing where he set up this big psychodrama and it never really came to
Yeah.
fruition. So
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Flamingo is such an interesting one because he is a Catholic therapist that a lot of leaders in the Archdiocese of New York have referred people to. Religious orders in the area have referred people to. Um, yeah, some prominent Catholics have seen him and written about their experiences with him,
yeah,
which were quite negative. Yeah,
yeah.
could you just talk about just what, because he is someone that the Archdiocese has relied on and sent people to. Could you just talk about how that experience, seeing him as a client?
Yeah, I just want to be very clear. I was referred to him by Father Benedict Groeschel from the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal.
Oh, yeah,
I tried to
yeah,
join the CFRs during my psychological evaluation. I did tell Father Benedict I was gay. He asked me to see Father Dr. Mango, and so it
yeah.
was cash pay. It was in Manhattan, and I would say on many levels he was very unprofessional. Paperwork
Mm.
was often late. He was late. He fell asleep during session multiple times. I'm a licensed therapist now, and in retrospect,
Oh my gosh.
he had no like theoretical underpinnings. It was like ad hoc. There was no formulation, right? So I did therapy later at a later time, and my therapist had a full formulation and would have like a plan and would have like specific things to work on. He would it was just intermittent. It was whatever he had going on, and so I would go in and I would say, hey, whatever. It was a really rough weekend. I was feeling insecure.
Yeah,
And one time he said, "Let me tell you a story." He goes, I was protesting outside of a porn shop, and the mob came, the Italian mob, and they said, what do you need? What are you doing here?" And he goes, "I got to do what I got to do." And he was very New York, so good. And they said, well, I got to do what I got to do. And and he said, okay. And he goes, in that moment, I was praying to Saint Michael, Our Lady of Victories. And he goes, this
As
is
one
a type
does.
of warfare we're experiencing. I mean, this isn't therapy where I'm spending 100 and whatever, $60 an hour. Why is he telling me this story? This has no relevance
Oh
to me
my gosh.
whatsoever.
I can't.
Yeah, one day in one of our sessions, he started off by berating me, and I knew it was part of like a psychoeducation thing. And he was
Hmm.
just berating me. You're ugly. You're fat. No one loves you. And I knew he was up to something. And he goes, this is what's called psychological warfare. He goes, I'm training you. I'm training you, so that when this happens in real life, you can kind of defend yourself. And again, as a licensed therapist, first of all, I would never do any psychodrama without informed consent. And second of all, that
Yeah.
there's nothing of that in the literature that I'm familiar with. I mean, that's crazy. And that was for
Yeah.
$160 an hour. That's an expensive, expensive activity.
Yeah. That's like very expensive incompetence. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I keep laughing because I'm just kind of like, how
That
else
was
you're supposed to respond to this? But also for a lot of people, this can be really traumatizing, and it's expensive. And one of the things that comes to mind for me is, I often think that Catholic institutions' commitment to these sorts of narratives and very niche theories often leads to us institutionalizing incompetence. Right? Like, this is the guy that the diocese was recommending to. Is this the best that we have to offer? And if this is what it means to be really good at this as a church, what does that say about us?
exactly. I
Oh,
mean,
oh
so I
no.
remember talking to a friend about this. It's not the fact that he was crazy that upset me. It was the fact that he was
Yeah,
crazy, and then he became like the guest of honor for those years. He spoke at the men's conference in the
yeah,
Archdiocese in Newark. He was speaking at all the CFR
yeah.
conferences for a while. I think eventually people were like, okay, this is getting a little nutty, and I think he kind
A
of
little
fell out of
weird.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I remember going on this big retreat, and it was supposed this great guest speaker. I forget the guy's name. He was a New York priest, very very dynamic presenter. You could tell he was very kind of well sought after. And then I went to confession to him after, and I confessed being sexually active and or masturbating or using pornography. And he goes, men, women, what's the deal? And I said, it's mostly men. I'm gay. And he goes, bro, the parts don't fit. The parts don't fit. And that was his advice. That was, this is a keynote speaker. This is the guy that they're bringing in for the bit, and his therapeutic, I mean, his not therapeutic, his sacramental counsel was, quote, bro, the parts don't fit, end quote.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that,
I've increasingly I used to get really upset by responses like that. And I think increasingly my position has become, the more unhelpful things that they say, the more wackadoodle things that they put forward, that should just give people greater freedom to feel like they don't need to listen to any of that stuff,
yes,
right? Like,
yes,
these people are not reliable. The people referring us to these people are not reliable. So, maybe we can just give ourselves space to figure things out. So I actually find when people say stuff like that, I'm like, oh, that's actually really helpful.
exactly. I think after I came out of that whole environment for the first year or two, it was very frustrating and painful, and
Hmm.
I had to do a lot of work to
Yeah,
undo that. Now I can laugh at it.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
some of it is so absurd,
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many little examples of those like just kind of absurd things, especially after the fact.
yeah,
Especially that when
yeah.
people
And
just yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
When I've often found, like, I find it so helpful to unpack this stuff with people who are not in the weeds there, because when you're in it, you assume everything is normal, right? And it can take years for you to figure out that the truly wild stuff is as wild as it was, because you think it's normal until someone tells you it's not, right? And I think that's one of the like real benefits of sharing your story with other people, whether it's, on a platform like this or just with friends and people you trust, especially people that didn't grow up in these environments. That can be really helpful to identify like what was unusual about your experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think one of the core things that I was taught in the church was that anyone outside of their rubric, so to speak, was kind of evil, right? It's this idea of like modernism. They don't care about your faith. So I
Mm-hmm.
remember even when I was taking my counseling courses, the seminary said, be careful. They're it's very modern and very antithetical to the gospel. one of my professors was an atheist. She was so interested in my experience. She would always ask me to talk about it, and we
Hmm.
were great friends, right? And so,
Hmm.
and then when I came out
Hmm.
to, a lot of people say, oh, the queer agenda is like antithetical to the church. I remember coming out to,
Hmm.
when I came out to Salt Lake City, I was working at the Pride Center, and some of the people there were like, "This is fascinating. You're a former priest. Like,
Yeah.
let's go out for coffee. I want to hear more." We became great friends, and so that
Hmm.
whole narrative was
Yeah.
just, I just never found to be true. That this modern
Yeah.
world is antithetical. People loved my contributions, and even in the mental hospital, people would say
Yeah.
like, "Hey, do you want to run a
Yeah.
spirituality group? The kids are asking for it." That could be really cool. So I didn't
Yeah.
like. I think one of
Hmm.
the aspects of cultish behavior is that they're afraid of things on the outside, and so I just found that I
Hmm.
was like, wow, this
Yeah.
modern world is very, in a lot of ways, is very open to the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think, I think that the arguments matter. I think that the law matters. But I think ultimately the thing that's going to be most damaging to the ex-gay narratives and conversion therapy and all of these theories are going to be lives of LGBTQ plus people who are happy and live full lives and are contributing to their communities and doing good things in the world. Because I think for so long, a lot of us were just really convinced that if you come out and you live this lifestyle, you're going to abandon your faith. You're going to have no integrity. All of your life is going to be about sex. You're not going to be contributing to society. You're going to be a moral degenerate. You're going to become a criminal. And, I mean, obviously people do all of those things, but you don't need to be queer to do them. In fact, you can be a Catholic priest. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's funny. I remember at one point, someone had said something along the lines of, you've like abandoned your flock, you've done this, and you're leading this like intense life of
Mm.
sin. And I'm like, I work at a
Yeah.
mental hospital for adolescents who
Mm.
are in need. I'm not like a gang leader. Like I'm not like robbing people. I mean, I am living a life
Yeah.
of a lot of virtue, and I mean, of course, there's also I'm also living a life um, of kind of seeking a new value system because I didn't the one
Mm.
that was given to me. Like not all of those still apply, but for example, I
Yeah.
just ended a relationship of a year. I was
Mm.
actually broken up with it, and I'm happy to share this because I think it's relevant. It was a beautiful breakup. Um, there's no
Mm.
anger, resentment. It was respectful with integrity. It was a values based breakup. I love this guy. And
Mm.
he needs some time to work through things, and so it was cordial, it was respectful, and so this whole idea that once you step away from the church, it's this one large orgy, and there are no ethical values or no morality is definitely, I think, incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting you say that because I had an experience over the last year where I had this very intense, short. I don't know how to call it a relationship, but a short something with someone else, and it ended just because they were moving and it just wasn't going to work out. And afterwards, I felt a lot of grief about it. And I felt a certain amount of heartbreak over it. And I was just very open about my feelings with my friends and kind of like opened up about my grief, let them see it. And they received it so like kindly. And it was a thing that could be granted the space that it needed and that it wanted without being just completely disruptive. And I realized how wonderful it is to be at a place in my life now where I can be open about my feelings and my experiences and share them with people who will receive them lovingly and be encouraging and give them space,
Mhm.
right? Which is not something that I really felt that I had fully when I was in these more restrictive Catholic communities.
Absolutely, I would agree. I mean, I have a similar setup where I think in some, because being gay is seen as pathological in the church or some kind of
Mm,
like sinful disposition, I think a lot of times people don't know how to
yeah,
handle it, right? And so, for example, before I was doing a lot of like covert sexual activity, and I was on apps, and like I wouldn't show my face, which led me to be in situations that were like higher risk, right? And so finally, when I moved into a what I think
yeah,
to be more healthy and integrity relationship, one of my peers who is a Catholic priest at this time said something along the lines of like, "Why can't you just have something on the side where it's secret, right?" And I
mm-hmm,
said, "That's not going to
yeah,
work with my life of integrity. I don't want secrets, And I
yeah,
mean, discretion is one thing, but I just don't want secrets." And then when I was seeking
yeah,
something that was monogamous and more committed, the feedback I got, and I said this on our last interview, but the feedback I got was that is a sin of the intellect and a sin of pride because you think you know better than the church. That's a graver sin than the
Yeah.
sins of the flesh. And so I was like, let me just make
Yeah.
sure I understand. So if I go into New York City and have an anonymous hookup and it's like not very enjoyable and it's kind of higher risk and I don't see the person's face and I don't know about their sexual health, I don't even know their name. That is better than having like a partnership where we get to know each other, we work on virtues, and that person was like, yeah. And I think, that was the moment I was like, this is crazy. Like this, this is crazy.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the way I describe it to
Yeah.
my friends out here who may be atheists or didn't grow up in the church, I said it's like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or something.
Mm. Yeah.
If you're watching the show and you know it, the internal logic makes sense to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So if I go
Absolutely.
into say, hey, there's four different houses and they get assigned to each house, to, depending on their characteristics, and they have to find the magical stone.
Mm-hmm.
If you know the story, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And this house does
Yeah.
this, but it's not real. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
when I think in the church, I'm not saying none of it's real. The faith claims I think have a lot of
Yeah.
beautiful reality to them, but
Yeah.
it's when you're in that rubric, it's hard to get out of it unless you take a full step back. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I do think also, for people who do, I do think you can believe what the catechism has to say about this stuff while also recognizing the validity of these stories and the harms that people experience in these spaces and the reasons why people leave them and seek out something else. Um, I don't think that those things are incompatible.
I
Yeah.
would agree. I mean, I had some friends who did not believe in the whole conversion therapy kind of movement and still
Hmm.
believed in the church's teaching about like same sex love and intimacy. They were more integrated in my opinion. They were like, I don't buy all this conversion therapy nonsense, but like I'm still
Yeah.
choosing to live celibately and chastely. And then to
Sure.
those people, I say,
Yeah.
great, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, with where I am right now, yeah, for people who are, want to live a traditional Christian sexual ethic and do that well, I do want to provide support for that, and I want people to live full, happy lives, and I think you can do that in a variety of ways, and so for those people, I do hope that these sorts of conversations are helpful to them as well.
Yeah.
But I want to get kind of to your story and your processing of it. So, we shared a little bit earlier about how, some of the more wild content from your history is like
Yeah.
funny,
Yeah.
but you also shared that, there was a time period where you had to process a lot of the grief, anger, frustration related feelings and emotions when it came to those experiences. Can you just talk a little bit about, what does that processing look like? What was helpful or unhelpful as you were unpacking that and having to deal with the big emotions around it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, first of all, the best way I understand the complexity of the conversion therapy experience is what James Allison, the author, would call a double bind. So here's the double bind:
Hmm.
God loves you just as you are, but in order to have that, you need to
Hmm.
change just a little bit. And in order to change, you need to do these things. And guess what? After a
Hmm.
few years of trying to do them, they don't work, and so you're probably not doing
Hmm.
it well enough. It's a mind fuck. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for my language. Edit that out if you need to. It's a
Yeah.
mindset. I mean,
I think that's accurate.
I would go on every retreat known to mankind. I went to every healing mass. I had exorcisms performed. I had a minor exorcism performed
Hmm.
to rebuke the spirit of homosexuality in the holy name of Jesus
Hmm.
and bind him in his precious blood. And none of it worked. And I'm like, Lord, I am begging to be delivered from this, and it's not working. And so it's this like double, even triple bind. In kind of deconstructing everything, what was helpful is a community that I had a few dear friends who seemed to get it or get enough of it and
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
willing to. So it's funny. I'm 40. I always ask myself when I have the triggering experience, how old am I in gay years? Because in a way,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
never
Hmm.
lived my gay years as teens and 20s. So like, I'll go
Yeah.
out dancing in the club, and I'm like insecure. I'm like, oh, are those people judging me? So emotionally, I feel like 22 in the moment, even though
Hmm.
I'm 40.
Yeah.
Professionally, I'm 40 on. So I had a crew of friends who not here's the key difference. In the church, it was people who would tolerate you and
Hmm.
love you in spite of that. I had
Mm,
a peer group who was able to not only like tolerate it, but to celebrate it
mm,
and
mm-hmm.
to actually kind of like hear my experience and journey with me and be patient with me. So, for example, I remember the first time I went out dancing, I was with my dear friend Rachel, and she was like, I was like, I'm a little insecure. That group of popular guys just walked in. She's like, yeah, that's okay. It's normal to be insecure. Let's just dance and have a good time.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. And so I
yeah,
think what happened is normalizing my human experiences, and
yeah,
that's it.
yeah,
As a priest, you're this anointed one. You're this chosen one, set apart by God to do all these things in persona Christi Captitis. You're representing Christ the head. It's very abnormal. And so I remember having these experiences. I would be like, to use Rachel or you, Chris or Simon, I'd be like, yeah, I was ghosted again on Tinder. And it's like,
mm,
well, welcome,
mm-hmm.
welcome to planet Earth. Like that's what happens. you know. And so I think just
Yeah,
to normalize my experiences, like I am a regular human being in this world having
mm,
challenges. And that's good and normal. And
yeah,
so instead of me being an anointed altarist Christi trying to like minister to the world, and that was
yeah,
really helpful. And it was so fun. I mean, the deconstruction was painful, but going to the club, I mean, going to drag shows and dancing, and I'm sober. It's funny, like a lot of people think the queer life is like so connected to the party life, and that's true to some extent. But I go to a lot of these events sober, and it is a blast. It is an absolute
mm,
blast. I love it. I go out dancing, singing, all the things, and it's a great time.
yeah, yeah. And I do think that is, something wonderful to be able to experience at any point of your life, being able to kind of like be free and figure yourself out in those contexts. I do often say that, when you come out is actually when you start adolescence. And I think for a lot of LGBTQ people, we get our adolescence later on in life, which I think does cause some grief. I do wish that I could have done these, like a lot of the stuff when I was younger and just in a stage of life to explore where there may be more support structures that younger people do have. But, it's I just think it's never too late to start this journey, and you don't feel like you have to have missed out on life. Your life can always just be the thing that you're living, and you can choose to experience life at
Yeah.
whatever stage.
It's funny. Everyone comes out at the different journeys, and like I've journeyed with some people who are in their 60s coming out for the first time, and it's all beautiful.
Mm,
It's really cool to see everyone. I was at the club dancing one night, and in those environments, sometimes it's like different friend groups, and all of a sudden you're hanging out with a friend of a friend of a friend. And so in one instance, it was a girl. She was maybe 22, 21, 22, and I thought she was my friend's friend. People went away to get a drink, go to the bathroom. All of a sudden, it was just me and her. And I said, "Oh, hey, by the way, like the music is so loud you can barely hear one another." I said, "Oh, how do you know how do you know Peter?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't. Your group just seemed fun. I'm here alone." And I just came up and I said, "Oh, that's great. You're welcome to." And
funny.
and then and then all of a sudden she shouted out. She goes, "I just graduated from BYU. You're not allowed to be queer at BYU." And she goes, "And I'm having so much fun." And she just shouted it,
Oh,
and we were just
yeah.
being goofy, having a good time. It was just kind of cool. And so in those environments, it's really neat to see people thrive in kind of their own identity. Just
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that's something really important to emphasize. There is this narrative within very, I guess like high control Catholicism is what some people call it, of, what your lifestyle will be like after you come out. And, the experience of people who've actually gone through that is, the lifestyle is very varied. It's a lot of different things. Like I know you like to dance, but I also know that you require a very balanced life. You need to sleep, you need to meditate, you need to do your yoga. You
I
need to have
do.
order in your life, and you actually live like a much more ordered life, I would say, than a lot of the committed Catholics I know.
It's funny. I call it like my aurorium. I used to go on the retreats and do morning prayer, and I still do it. I mean, I'm on vacation right now. I'm in the Airbnb,
Oh,
and I woke up. I had coffee. I prayed. I read. I meditated, and then I went for a walk. And now I'm
mm,
talking to you. And I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go out for a hike. One of the reasons I live in Salt Lake is all the outdoor access. So I ski every weekend in the winter. I love the winter. I have
mm.
friends. We go out and do all these things. We travel. But yeah, I'm like 8 hours of sleep every night. I mean, it's funny because I'll go out dancing, and then it's like 12:30, and I'm like, okay, time for bed. And
Yeah,
yeah, so I do think that order of life and having that community is really really important.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd be really curious for you, looking back on, your experience within like conversion therapy and, being part of that like support group, going to Journey into Manhood. you know, you mentioned that you had opportunities to like explore some wounds and dig into various areas of your life. Did you find like any of it helpful? Is there anything from that experience that, while recognizing that it's harmful and shouldn't happen, there are also things that you may be grateful from those experiences?
Absolutely. So I think one of the compelling aspects of conversion therapy is that it is built on things that are true, right? So, hey,
Mm,
you had
mm-hmm,
wounds from your past that were hard. That's true. I did have some bullying when I was 14. My freshman year of high school was kind of chaotic, right? It wasn't the best environment, but I don't think that caused me being gay. And so I was able to go through some of those experiences and actually get some healing. And so, for example, in
mm,
Journey into Manhood, they were like, let's think of an experience that was hard with your peers. So I thought about that. Freshman year of high
mm,
school, I got in trouble. I had some friends who were like, hey, we don't want to be friends with you anymore because guilty by association. That
mm,
was hurtful.
mm-hmm,
And they were like, so what core beliefs did you have around that? Well, my core belief is that friends will leave
mm,
me if it doesn't suit them.
mm,
Okay, let's
mm-hmm.
but that's a classic CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. What are you feel like?
Yeah,
What do those thoughts make you feel? And so I was able to go through and actually enjoy some positive aspects of it, right? And so I was able to say, okay,
yeah,
in that case, it's good to have friendships, and if people leave, it doesn't mean everyone will leave. It's just that one instance. But again, that's classic
yeah,
CBT. But then their jump from is that, and that's why you like men. And I'm like, well, hold on. Now
yeah,
that's a big. So I do think it
yeah,
created a very self-reflective. Now that's a big. So I do think it created a very self-reflective environment, and also like I was
mm,
single all my 20s, so
mm-hmm,
I did get very used to being single. Like I'm very independent, and I'm very good at being alone because I'm my all of my 20s I was single and solo, and so very independent. I mean, I
yeah,
could go on vacations for a whole week and just read, hike by myself for days, and so I think it created some self satisfaction. I'm very comfortable being by myself
yeah.
and being alone,
Yeah,
and
that all
I'm
makes
very
a lot of
social on top of
sense. And yeah, what you're saying is very consistent with what I hear from other people, which is, yeah, when we get into these environments and we're asked to, raise these questions and explore areas where we've been hurt, absolutely, we do find areas that we've been hurt. Some of this does end up bringing true, and it does bring up things that maybe I wouldn't have brought up otherwise. But then on the flip side, one of the things that I also hear from people is that later on, when I reckoned with the ways that this also hurt me, and then I was trying to get therapeutic help later on, it made it really hard for me to develop a healthy relationship with my therapist because I was so afraid that they were going to hurt me in the ways that conversion therapists hurt me. And it sounds like that wasn't your experience, and now you are a mental health professional. Yeah, I'd be really curious to also hear from you how have those experiences informed how you show up as a mental health professional?
Yeah, that's a question.
Mm,
It has impacted my relationship with professionals. So, for example, just my primary care physician. I love them. Great. Very 5 minutes from my house. He was. I asked to
mm,
do some sexual health evaluations, and I was asking questions about prep and those types of things. And he was like,
mm,
I'm gonna have to send you to a specialist. I don't know anything about that. So I went to a specialist, very expensive. And
mm,
after two or three appointments, she was like, why are you here? She's like, you don't meet criteria to meet with. And I said, that's what my primary care. So then I did some research. It turns
mm,
out
mhm,
prep is literally the definition of primary care. And so I went to him
mm,
and he
mhm.
goes, yeah, I don't know. I just feel
Yeah,
uncomfortable. I was like, we're done. We're done then. Respectfully, I was like, I
yeah,
can't have any professionals in my
yeah.
life being like
I also,
being
I,
shamed or confused
I also
about
think that's so
gay sexual health.
problematic
You know what I mean?
because,
So I
they
was
could
like,
have
thank you
referred you
very
to another
much.
primary and said that, this is something I could work on. And instead they sent you to someone more expensive that
Yes.
you didn't need to see.
Yep. She was the specialist was an infectious disease specialist, and she was like, I don't have. She's like, I don't. She was very respectful of HIPAA, but she's like,
Yeah,
you're the only one like you that's on my list.
yeah.
I don't know why. So I went to the next primary care and I said, hey, do you prescribe prep? And they're like, yeah, I don't. So and I did. I said I'm not resentful of the guy, but I was like, I made an appointment. I looked him in the eyes and I said, I said this is primary care, and I said I feel uncomfortable with the
Mm,
fact that you're not willing to learn about this.
mm.
And so I'm going to be choosing a different doctor. And he was grateful for the conversation. So it does impact my relationship with professionals. I have no time for incompetence or
Mm.
any
Yeah.
trace of homophobia in the
Yeah,
professional world.
that's my
I'm out.
thing.
I'm out 100%
It's just
because
like
I'm
I
paying
don't
for it.
have any
If it's
more
not paid, if it's a
time and
volunteer, it's fine.
money to be
Yeah,
wasting on this stuff, right? Like all the money that vulnerable LGBTQ Catholics have poured into wasted conversion therapy efforts for years, and they all get to keep the money
yeah,
that they
yep.
receive for giving unethical, unprofessional practices where some of them even fell asleep during sessions. And then later on, we're still having to pay more than our peers to get primary care. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And right now, I mean, I have my own therapist.
Yeah.
We meet virtually,
Yeah.
and with my code, it's $25. He's like world class, and I'm like, this is crazy. I was paying 160 out of pocket traveling to Manhattan to see this
Yeah.
guy who's telling
Yeah.
me stories about mob bosses at the porn shop, and so the way I show up as a therapist is I am very friendly and approachable, and so like I'm not rigid, but I'm like very, very keen on professional
Mm-hmm.
boundaries and things like informed consent. So, for example, if I have a client and I'm going to challenge them, I'm going to be like, "Hey, I kind of want to challenge you a little bit. I kind of want to challenge you. Are you okay with that? How are you feeling about that?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I'll challenge them a little bit, and then I'll be like, "Hey, let's check in. How did that feel? How is this feeling?" So I do a lot of checking in, because I'll even share, "Hey, I'm having some transference. Let's just say you're my client, Chris. Chris, you're a really high functioning person. You're really smart. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
want to throw some things at you that's kind of challenging. Are you open to that?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, like bring it on." And then I'm like, how did that feel? Did that, you know what I mean? So I check in with a lot, but also I'm really strict on my boundaries, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting in the way of people's values. Because I do have some clients, or I've had clients in the past that want to maintain, like their ethics about, for example, their LDS, more what we call Mormon. So they have a sexual. It is not my job as a professional to try to
Yeah.
convince them to like be more progressive. So I love journeying with people as they are, taking it slow, and then deferring. Like I've had LDS people who ask moral questions, and I'm like, hey, I want to check in with. I want to see what you're thinking. Like, does your bishop want to weigh in on this for morality stuff, or you know what I mean? Like bringing people in. I think one of the toxic traits
Oh
of the
yeah.
conversion
Oh, that's
therapy
such
thing
a
is
yeah.
isolating outside voices. And so, for example, like when there's a morality question, I don't say, "Oh, I'm a former Catholic priest. I know what that's like." I would,
Mm,
I'll say, "Hey, I wonder what your priest is saying about that, and how can we
mm,
integrate that, and
yeah.
if that is important to you, if that makes sense." Internally, I'm like, "Oh, this guy." this guy. Internally, I'm like, "That priest
Yeah.
is not right," but I wouldn't say that to a client.
Yeah.
I would be like,
Yeah, that
"Okay,
makes
like
me
tell
think
me how
of
this makes you feel when your
my
priest says that."
therapist was going to go on a maternity leave, and so I was like doing some consultations about seeing someone in the interim, and one of the guys I talked to was a gay guy who I knew was partnered, and I basically told him, like let's say that, hypothetically I wanted to live a traditional Christian sexual ethic. I wanted to integrate my faith and my sexuality, work on that in the context of therapy. I wanted to not masturbate, look at pornography, all that stuff. How would you handle that? And he basically said, he's like, look, like I have my own life, I have my own views, but that stuff is for me and this space is for you. And to the extent that things that you say bring up things for me, that's for me to take to my own therapist. That's not for you to deal with. Um, which is not how I found conversion
Yes.
therapists handle those sorts of
Yes.
conversations. Generally, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean,
Hmm?
we like therapists get paid pretty well, and when you're paid well, you're a licensed professional, you're expected to be able to handle that. I've called my support group, or I've
Mm-hmm.
called my and be, oh, this session's triggered me,
Yeah.
and I'm going to work through it, but it's not for client to deal with, because they're paying for it. This is a professional. I mean, if I was being triggered so bad where I couldn't be objective, I would maybe bring that up with the client and be like, hey, I'm
Sure.
wondering if I can
Yeah.
help find
But I mean, that's
something
also
different. But
professional,
I've
right?
never
If
had
you
to
get
do
to a
that.
point to where you don't feel that you
Yeah.
can emotionally regulate yourself within a therapeutic relationship, then it's your responsibility to, take a step outside of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I love that, Danny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear from you, just because we kind of near the end, what are you excited about in your life? What do you hope to achieve? What do you want out of your time as a professional in this space?
Yeah, I'm really excited about continuing to explore relationships. I was really like thirsty when I first left the church. I was like, I want to date, I want to do
Mm,
this. And I was like very thirsty about it. And so I got a little
mm,
like, no one's
mm.
responding on Tinder and why, do
Yeah.
people not like me? Is there something wrong? I'm a little bit more chill now.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so I just love the idea of like growing in that environment. And this relationship I was in for
Mm,
the past year, it really helped me to grow. Like it really helped me to put
yeah.
him first and to be able to like reflect on how I can grow and change. And so that was a cool experience.
Yeah.
One thing I just wanted to add that I feel, if I can add one thing that I feel
Mm,
like the conversion therapy narrative really makes is that they take the negative aspects of like quote unquote the queer culture and they capitalize out on
mm,
that and
mhm.
say, see what happens when you choose this. There's sexual promiscuity, there's insecurity, there's flakiness. I mean, I've walked into a bar in Greenwich Village and I've said hello to
Mm,
someone and they gave me the look of like, you're not cute enough to talk to me. Of course, there are toxic traits,
mm.
but guess what? There's toxic traits about every culture. There's toxic traits about the finance bros, the gym
Yeah.
culture, right? Like every culture has toxic
Yeah.
traits. And I think the conversion therapy narrative manipulates that.
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
people be really flaky and really superficial with me in the queer culture, but I've also had that in the
Yeah.
medical culture, in the finance
Mm,
bro culture. So I
yeah.
do think they manipulate that. I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, I'm just excited to kind of keep exploring this side of myself and kind of getting to know just yeah, cultivating different relationships and yeah, and growing and just being more
Mm,
self-sufficient.
yeah.
Because I did this breakup was this past week.
Mm,
I'm out on vacation. And I was driving past Gonzaga University, and I love the Jesuits. And so I stopped and went into their chapel, St. Aloysius Chapel, and just took a few minutes to pray. So I think it's really cool to be able to bring God into my relationships and into my present moment, as opposed to, and I think I said this at our last conversation, it's not the faith that I'm leaving, it's not God's love and presence. I'm
yeah.
still
And I think
very
it's really
much,
important to
God is
emphasize,
still very much in
for
my life and
people
moment.
that
So
are thinking about taking a step away from their overly rigid faith communities and commitments, making that choice doesn't mean that you have to step away from your faith. If that's something that's important to you, you can still hold on to that and find ways to connect with it and make meaning
right.
with it. Yeah. Thanks for joining
Absolutely.
me, Danny.
Yeah,
Obviously, we could
absolutely.
keep going. I can do these
Yeah.
for hours and hours, and maybe we'll do another one later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.